In the passage of John 3:16, it reads, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." And some of you may know that this is the center of the Bible, the gospel. And this is the beginning, or rather, this is the story, which is God's story. It's the most compelling story of all time, the story of a true God who loves his children, who established for them a way of salvation and provided a route for them to eternity. This story speaks of a true God who loves his children and is one who speaks of grace, who is acting and is still moving today. He is a God who listens. He is a God who sent his one and beloved Son to atone for our sins and the entire sins of humanity, whose love for his people culminated in the sacrifice of Jesus, his only Son, for us. And so this is the story. God makes a promise in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Again, this promise involves the promised seed. He pronounces the promise in a curse against the serpent, and the serpent actually believes what God says exactly for what it is, which is why in Genesis chapter 4, we have the first murder. What is the first murder? The seed of the serpent, Cain, kills the seed of the woman, Abel. What happens after that? In chapter 4, at the end of it, and beginning to the start of chapter 5, we get the announcement of the coming of Seth and the restoration of the godly seed. Then in chapter 5, further down, we get a genealogy. There are 10 generations from Adam to Noah through the godly line of Seth. God wipes out the world in the flood. And you remember Noah and the ark, that story, right? God wipes out the world in the flood, and yet he preserves Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and their wives. Why is this important? Just like how Joseph's family needed to survive the famine, you have to have husbands and wives in order to have seed. And the seed was still promised, still had not come yet to fruition. And eventually, there came a man named Terah, who was an offspring by the name of Father Abraham. God makes a promise to this man named Abraham. And this promise involves, among other things, among being the father of many generations and as countless as the sand on the seashore, the promise is significant, and it's truly significant because if you remember his wife, particularly, she is too old for seed. She's too old to bear. So how do you get the promised seed if the seed-bearing woman is too old for seed? The answer is God must intervene. No, for Abraham, the answer was we have to find somebody else. And that's where Hagar comes into the picture. But that was the wrong answer. God didn't say, Abraham, you need a seed. God said, you need the seed. And so God did the impossible. While Sarah seemed to be beyond childbearing years, God gave them a promise that they would bear a son. And so from here we have Ishmael, that was a seed, but not the seed. Who is the seed then? Isaac. Isaac is the seed. Isaac then goes on and they have twins. Remember the twins, Esau and Jacob? Esau and Jacob. So from here, which one is it going to be in terms of birthright? Certainly it's going to be the older one, right? Clearly that's how it should go. No, the story was, it wasn't the older serving the younger, it was the inverse. The younger served the older. And so it's not Esau, it's Jacob. And so Jacob goes forth, and if the seed is coming, and it's going to come, Jacob has to find a wife. And if you remember, he goes to Laban, and he meets Laban's daughter, falls in love, and he thinks that he's found the one. For 7 years he works and gets married, and I still can't believe this, but he wakes up next to the other one, to the other woman. And you think this was a love story, but it's not a love story. It's a story of God's divine choosing. And so the one whom Jacob loves, he cannot bear children. She cannot bear children until way later in the story, until when she gives birth to a son named Joseph, and then a son named Benjamin. Joseph is loved above all of his brothers because he was the beloved son of the beloved wife. But Joseph was not the promised seed. And let me explain. The woman that he didn't even want, referring to Jacob's wife, when her sister couldn't have children, she did, and she proceeded to give birth to Reuben, Simeon, Levi, the father of the priesthood, and Judah. And as we come to the story in Genesis chapter 37, where we first learn about Joseph, following that is chapter 38, where it talks about, and it seems out of place because it talks about Judah and Tamar. And particularly, this is the worst moment in Judah's life. So one may ask, why is chapter 38 specifically about Judah and Tamar after the introduction of Joseph? Why is it here? It seems kind of out of place. You introduce us to Joseph and then you skip to, or you jump to Judah and Tamar. Why? Because it's not about Joseph, it's about Judah. Judah is the seed. Well, then why show Judah at his lowest point? Because God has to redeem Judah for him to take his place as head of the family and to be identified as the promised seed because of the divine choosing and work of God. And so God redeems Judah. And in what moment do we see Judah's redemption? When Judah says to his father Jacob, "Send me with the boy Benjamin. I know that you love him, and if anything happens to him, I will be his substitute." And from here, Joseph tests that. And he says that he's going to take and keep Benjamin, right? Then Jacob says, "It'll kill me. It'll kill my father. Take me instead of my brother as his substitute, and put his punishment upon me in order that my father may be pleased by his redemption." Doesn't this story again sound familiar? About someone being a substitute and that they may please the Father's will? It's pertaining to the story of Christ. And so Judah goes on, and bear with me a little longer, going further down the line of genealogy. Judah goes on to have a son, a great, I believe 5 greats, great grandson, and his name is David. David, just like his father Judah, shows up on this scene, particularly when he comes across and encounters this giant he has to fight. This giant's name is Goliath. And so what does he do what does David do when he shows up on the scene? When he's finally identified and the promised seed brings forth his presence with authority, he walks down to the valley and Goliath made a proposition. "Send me a man to fight with me. If he defeats me, we will serve you. And if I defeat him, you will serve me." And we know how the story goes. David fights Goliath. He doesn't even use the armor of King Saul. Just all he had was some rocks and a slingshot. And Goliath had all this armor, giant sword, whatever. And David's minuscule compared to Goliath. But here, David wins in victory. Goliath goes down, thereby winning victory on behalf of all of God's people. And that is a covenant made with him. And that covenant promises the throne and the king, the one and true king. And so King David, the descendant of Judah, the promised seed, eventually has a greater son down the line. A greater king who is the lion and the tribe of Judah. And so once you start to open the New Testament, it opens with a genealogy proclaiming the God who made a promise in Genesis 3 has fulfilled that promise. These are the line of the promised seed who will crush the head of the snake. And so Jesus, like his forebearers of Abraham, David, and Judah, Christ stood as a substitute on behalf of God's people. Christ laid down his life. He accepted the wrath of God poured out upon him so that he may have victory on behalf of God's people. He may have victory over death and over sin so that all who are found in him would be rescued, redeemed, and saved. And so the importance of Genesis chapter 41 is that God rescues Joseph in order to rescue Judah, in order to rescue Israel, in order to rescue each and every one of us. This is the history. History is his story. It is never ours to begin with. This is God's divine love story for us, of redemption, of wanting a relationship with us, of reconciling us again from our fallen and sinful state. And so this is about God ultimately in his providence orchestrating all of history, all of his story rather, in order to bring about that which we need more than anything else. That is to be saved and rescued by God and from God's wrath. The first Adam ate, and we all died in him. And the last Adam died, and as a result, we shall all feast and celebrate with him. The gift of salvation and the gift of Jesus Christ is given to us freely by God. And so this story comes to an end now. God's message rings loud and clear, and now you have heard a message that is never more extraordinary, more eternally significant than this, that Jesus, God's Son, came to provide salvation for us all. And so that the entirety of God's story shows us that it has led up to this ultimate news that we can experience and share with others. Jesus came, lived, died, and rose again. So therefore, what will you do with this story?